So we've seen the 12th week of Yellow Vest demonstrations in France, and they turned quite nasty actually. The police were very aggressive, and which is ironic because they were called this Saturday to protest against police brutality. I mean, a number of people have been killed, many been injured, seriously injured, and the vast majority of the Gilets jaunes are just peaceful protesters who want to sort of raise issues with the French government, issues which have been ignored for too long. Um, the reason they're going on and on, these French protests, is because Macron is not addressing the issues that have been raised. Macron is from deep in the French establishment. He grew up with the super rich and the mega powerful, and it's their voice that he listens to, as well as the very bottom of society, the immigrants, especially in France, the Islamic immigration. And so he's representing these two extreme poles of society, and the great bulk of the French people feel disenfranchised. And because of that, they've cut themselves off from the established parties. They want nothing to do with them. This is a rebellion in France, an ongoing rebellion, which will have to reach some sort of crescendo. There'll have to be a conclusion at some stage. Now, it's been winter. It was a desperately cold weekend last weekend, and yet they still came out, the Gilets jaunes, and they will be out next weekend in much greater numbers. And they're going to be out in the spring, as the spring unfolds. You're going to see the numbers on the streets in France explode. Because what's happening in Europe now is that the whole Eurozone is going into a deeper and deeper recession. We've seen growth, negative growth in Italy, even the German economy. The engine of the Eurozone is starting to slow down and decline. And this is happening in France as well. And this is when ordinary people are feeling the pressure of rising rents, rising food costs, and yet wages are stagnant, and job opportunities in the Eurozone are becoming fewer and fewer. There's higher and higher unemployment. And this is the basis of the malaise in France, which is driving these yellow vests. There is a discontent in the people, and it's not being addressed. They don't like the fact that their welfare state has been invaded by immigrants, and they struggle now to get access to social housing and to welfare benefits, just like in Britain, where it's the British people who've been driven off benefits into work. I mean, there's a lot of casual work. Britain's doing relatively well outside of the Eurozone. But there's a desperate problem with housing in Britain. There are 600,000 foreigners living in social housing now in Britain. And this is a time when the British people cannot get adequate housing because the population is surging with the immigration and with the higher birth rate amongst the immigrants. Housing is now very scarce in Britain, and it's becoming a really crucial issue. And it's these fundamental social issues which are driving the Yellow Vest protest in France and also in Britain. Because Paris and London are very closely linked. There's a rail link, and geographically they're not that far apart. The British are observing what's happening in Paris, and we know that there's social unrest, and we're seeing this echoed in Britain itself. This weekend there was a significant Yellow Vest protest in London. Again, there was heavy-handed policing. Again, this necessitated blocking the roads. When they have these Yellow Vest protests in London, they have a dramatic impact because it's the centre of attention. And there was also a Yellow Vest protest in Newcastle and Bristol. And there's one in Manchester next Saturday, February the 9th. It's really an important one for the north of England. It's an opportunity to show our discontent, to show the fact that we're disillusioned with the political parties, with the whole Brexit process. The people are sort of being pushed to one side in this Brexit process. It's sort of a discussion amongst politicians in the House of Commons. But it was we, the people, 17.4 million of us, a record vote, which voted to leave the European Union. And how dare the political elite try and sabotage that vote? We want a clean break. We want out. And that's the day of our independence. That's the day when we're no longer under the shackles of the European elite. But the French, no, they're under the weight of the French elite. And the French elite are looking for an excuse to clamp down on the Gilets jaunes. They fabricated this yellow, what was it, the yellow scarf movement, red scarf movement, which was a sort of an establishment group, an establishment conspiracy to bring a number of paid actors together, pretend that they were protesting on the street against the yellow vest, you know, the Macron supporters en marche. It was farcical, and it didn't last. I mean, it lasted one weekend. There was no continuation of it this weekend. So the red scarves, they're being used by the establishment to say that the French people don't want the yellow vests, but the French people are very sophisticated politically. They understand what is happening in their country, and they're not going to be fobbed off. They're not going to be sort of twisted by the media. They know the truth, that Macron does not speak for them. He speaks for the elite. He wants more European integration. He wants more immigration. He wants more control from above. And yeah, but we want control from below. We want the populace to have a voice. This is why the Yellow Vests are calling for referendums. You know, let the people's voice be heard. We're sick of the elite manipulating a situation against us. And we see this demographic transformation of our society, continuous mass immigration, undermining wages, as well as colonising the welfare state, taking over our cities. And we don't like it. We don't like it. We want our nations to survive and prosper. We are the indigenous people of these of France and of Britain and of Europe. And these countries belong to us. They don't belong to the elite to give away. And this is what fundamentally is driving the Yellow Vest as well. We're taking a stand for our national survival, for our own survival, for our children's future. And there's another thread in the British Yellow Vest protests, which you see with Tracy Blackwell. She's the mother of one of the three lads who were killed by the Asian driver and his in London. I think it was Josh, Harry and George, the three lads who were mown down and murdered, and two others were seriously injured in at least a racial, possibly terrorist attack against them, which the police covered up. The police said it was just a drunk driving incident when it clearly wasn't. This driver drove yards, hundreds of yards along the pavement to hit these kids. And he turned left into them. He didn't turn right back onto the road. It was a deliberate act of murder. And the police, not wanting to admit that it was a willful attack, possibly a terrorist attack, quickly covered it over. It's really the biggest cover-up since the Hillsborough tragedy, and it needs to be exposed, because the guy who murdered these three kids has had his sentence reduced. He's only been charged with drunk driving, irresponsible driving, and he's going to serve. He's been given 10 years in prison. He'll get out probably at 5, and this is for the murder of 3 young lads. And the reason justice has not been done is because he was an Asian and they were British lads, and the police wanted to cover it over. There was a potential terrorist element to this attack, and the police have not really told us much about the driver who killed these lads, but we know the co-driver was a Pakistani jihadist, and we want the truth to come out on this, and we want justice to be done. These 3 lads, Josh, Harry and George, I mean, you know, they've been murdered in cold blood, viciously, and justice must be done. And, you know, all power to Tracy Blackwell. She's linked up with the Yellow Vest movement. She's an integral part of it. We have the Brexit element. We have this justice for the boys. And there's a third element as well, free speech. We're seeing free speech restricted more and more in Britain, not just legally through the courts and through prosecuting people for bogus hate speech, supposed hate speech, simply telling the truth normally, but also the shutting down the social media platforms. We've seen James Goddard has now been taken off Twitter as well. Tommy Robinson's been taken off Twitter. You know, I've been taken off Twitter. So many, Anne-Marie Waters, been taken off, constantly banned off Facebook. It's an infringement of our civil liberties. The far left can say anything, can do anything, and they never seem to be sanctioned. But if you're a patriot, or if you're standing up for justice for our people, you're kicked off these social platforms and you're harassed by the police. You turn into a public enemy for standing up for justice and for British democracy. You know, the referendum vote. And therefore, we need to take to the streets. We need to make our presence felt. These demonstrations in London, Yellow Vest demonstrations, they shook the establishment. They're still shaking the establishment. And I believe that one of the primary reasons why we haven't had another referendum on Europe, because the establishment is scared of what they will unleash on the streets. Because we want our initial verdict, the decision to leave, to be respected. Every referendum in Britain, I think we're looking at 8 or 9 referendums, has had the result respected and put into practice. This should be no exception. The people have spoke, and as Dave Cameron said, what you decide will be. We've made our decision, and it's time for the politicians to put that decision in practice. On March the 29th, we leave the European Union. If that's fudged, or if that is some way thwarted, there will be true protest on the streets. But keep your eyes on France. Keep your eyes on Europe. The Yellow Vests are about to explode in a way the establishment never imagined. Thank you for watching this video. We're putting out messages as often as we can now to stir up the people of this nation and the people of the West to fight back on behalf of their nations, to have confidence that we can win. We're trying to buy new equipment. We want to buy a small camera so that we can film outside, and we want to buy some radio mics so we can get good sound quality outside. So we're looking for funds really to promote this work that we're doing. So if you support us and you want to invest in this battle to save our nation, there's a PayPal link in the description. If you can, please make a donation. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. Ring the bell as well so you get a notification of any future videos we make. We're turning out 2, 3, 4 videos a week now, and we're going to keep on this battle until we win. Thank you.